There's a story in the Bible that begins with tears and ends with an entire tribe of warriors. A boy born during the most painful moment of his father's life, a son who received two different names on the same day, a youngest child who became the last hope of a family marked by conflict. We are talking about Benjamin, Jacob's youngest son, the boy who almost didn't have a name, but who would carry an extraordinary destiny. Have you ever stopped to think about why your mother died giving birth to you? Why your father changed your name right after your birth? And why, years later, you would become a central figure in one of the most impactful stories of the Old Testament? The biblical story of Benjamin is not just about birth and death. It's about how God transforms tragedy into purpose, pain into legacy, and a frail boy into a symbol of strength. And there's something in this story that I'll only reveal at the end of this video, something about the role of the tribe of Benjamin in God's plan for Israel. Get ready, because the journey of Benjamin, son of Jacob, is just beginning. Jacob's caravan was heading toward Ephrath, and it was on the way that Rachel went into labor. But something was wrong. The delivery was difficult, very difficult. Rachel, Jacob's great love, the one for whom he labored for 14 years, was fighting for her life as she brought her second child into the world. The Bible records in Genesis 35 that she had great difficulty in childbirth. The midwife tried to encourage her, "Don't be afraid, you're having another child." But Rachel was weak. Her body wouldn't hold out. And then he was born, small, fragile, crying under the open sky of Canaan. But before there could be joy, tragedy took its place. Rachel, with her last strength, looked at her son and whispered a name, Benoni, son of my sorrow. The Bible simply says, when the soul departed, for it died. He named it Ben-Oni, Genesis 35:18. And as Rachel's life faded, one reality remained. That boy would carry a mark that none of Jacob's other sons had. He was the only one who cost his mother her life. Jacob held the baby. His hands trembled. His heart was broken. But he knew that boy couldn't live under the weight of a name that only spoke of death. How would you live, knowing that your existence cost the life of the person who loved you most, even before they met you? Jacob stood there, holding a newborn baby in his arms. Around him, the weight of loss. At his feet, Rachel's body was being prepared for burial. The desert was silent that late afternoon. The servants bowed their heads, respectful in the face of grief. Jacob's other sons watched from afar, trying to process what that moment meant. And the baby cried, as any newborn cries in the first moments of life. Benoni, son of my sorrow. That name echoed like a sentence, like a weight he would carry forever. Every time someone called him, it would be a reminder of the tragedy. He would forever be the son who brought death along with life. But Jacob knew the power of a name in the scriptures. A name is not just identification. It is a declaration of identity and destiny. Then Jacob declared in a firm voice, "No, his name will not be Benoni. He will be called Benjamin, son of my right hand." Genesis 35:18. That boy would not be defined by pain. He would be defined by honor, by strength, by his prominent position in the family. Benjamin would be the son who would stand at his father's right hand, the place of power, of protection, of inheritance in Hebrew culture. The biblical meaning of that name was a prophecy. It was Jacob's refusal to let tragedy have the last word. It was the faith of a man who, even in grief, still believed that God had a plan. And he did. But no one could have imagined how much that name would be tested in the years to come, because Benjamin would grow up in a family where names and destinies carried real weight, and where pain had not yet finished its work. Benjamin grew up as the youngest of 12 siblings, but this was no ordinary family. Around him were brothers from 4 different mothers, men who had already learned to compete for their father's attention. The genealogy of Jacob's sons was also a map of accumulated conflicts and tensions. He never knew his mother. He never heard Rachel's voice. You never felt her embrace. All he had was stories told by Jacob, stories of love, of waiting, of faithfulness. And that made Benjamin different. He wasn't just the youngest, he was the last visible piece of Rachel still alive. And Jacob protected him in a special way. But before Benjamin, there was another son of Rachel, Joseph, Jacob's favorite, the dreamer, the boy in the colorful tunic. And everyone knew what had happened to him, or at least what his brothers said had happened. Joseph was dead, or so Jacob believed, and now Benjamin occupied that place. He was Rachel's only remaining son, and Jacob protected him as one protects his last treasure, because, in a way, that's exactly what he was. The brothers saw, and they understood their father's pain. But they all knew Benjamin was not just another brother. He represented everything Jacob had lost with Rachel and Joseph. Meanwhile, Benjamin grew up unaware that one day he would be the key to the greatest turning point in Jacob's family history. Years passed. Famine came to the land of Canaan. Jacob was now an old man, marked by the weight of loss. He had never fully recovered from Joseph's supposed death, and Benjamin was all he had left of Rachel. And then came the news. There was food in Egypt, but to get more provisions, someone needed to go there, and the governor of Egypt was demanding something difficult. He wanted to see Benjamin. Jacob refused. "My son will not go. Joseph is already dead. If anything happens to Benjamin, you will bring my gray hair down to the grave in sorrow." Genesis 42:38. The words revealed a deep fear. But the famine was relentless. And Jacob's sons knew either Benjamin went or they would all die. Judah stepped forward. "Father, I will be responsible for him. If I do not bring Benjamin back to you, the blame will be on me forever." Genesis 43:9. It was the promise of a man already burdened by past mistakes. And so Benjamin set sail for Egypt. He didn't know it, but he was about to become the center of one of the most exciting plot twists in the Bible. Because the governor who wanted to see him wasn't a stranger. It was Joseph, the brother he barely knew. And when Joseph saw Benjamin, the Bible records, Joseph was deeply moved when he saw his brother, and he sought a place to weep. He went into his room and wept there. Genesis 43:30. Benjamin was more than a brother. He was the living link between the past and the present, between pain and possible restoration. And if you're enjoying this story, leave a like and subscribe to the channel, because there's still a lot more to come. Benjamin's journey was just beginning, and what was to come would test not only him, but his entire family. Every step towards Egypt was fraught with uncertainty. Benjamin walked beside his brothers. They were tense, as if they were carrying something heavy, memories perhaps, or fears they couldn't express in words. Judah walked in silence. He had given his word to Jacob. "If anything happens to Benjamin, it will be my fault." Those words echoed with every mile traveled, because Judah knew what it was to carry guilt. Years ago, he had participated in the sale of Joseph into slavery. He had seen the despair on his brother's face and accepted the silver coins. He had lied to his father and watched Jacob break down inside. And now, he was taking Rachel's last son to Egypt, the same place where everything had begun to fall apart. What Judah didn't know was that this journey wasn't just about food, it was about a second chance, an opportunity to do things differently. But to do that, Benjamin needed to get to Egypt. And more than that, he needed to come back, because Benjamin's destiny was connected to the redemption of the entire family. And in Egypt, Joseph had already prepared the trial that his brothers would face. Would they choose differently this time? Everything seemed to have gone well. Joseph had received them. He offered a banquet. He treated them with respect. And now they were returning home with provisions. Benjamin walked calmly. He would soon be back with his father. But then, screams in the distance. Egyptian soldiers approached, and the voice of Joseph's steward said, "Why have you repaid good with evil? Why have you stolen my master's silver cup?" The brothers were stunned, outraged. "Steal? Us? Sir, search our bags. If you find the cup with any of us, let that man die, and the rest of us will be your slaves." The steward replied, "Only the one who has the cup will remain as a slave. The others may go." Genesis 44:10. And then they began to open the bags one by one. Reuben, nothing. Simeon, nothing. Levi, nothing. Judah's heart began to race. He looked at Benjamin, who was pale, and when they opened Benjamin's bag, there it was, the silver cup. The Bible says, "Then they tore their clothes." Genesis 44:13, a sign of profound despair in Hebrew culture. Benjamin was in shock. He hadn't stolen anything, but the evidence was right there. They returned to the palace, and Joseph was waiting for them. "What is this that you have done? Didn't you know that a man like me can find out everything?" Genesis 44:15. Judah tried to speak, but what could he say? How could he explain? How could he save Benjamin? And there, in that tense moment, a single question hung in the air. Would they abandon Rachel's son this time? Joseph stood before them, powerful, ruthless, but inside, struggling with his own emotions. "All of you may go," he said, "but the young man with whom the cup was found shall remain here as my slave." Genesis 44:17. It was the same choice as years ago: save his own skin or risk everything for his brother. And it was then that Judah stepped forward. "My Lord, please, allow your servant to speak." His voice was firm, but filled with emotion. And Judah began to speak. He told about Jacob, about how his father had already lost a son, about how he wouldn't survive if he lost Benjamin as well. He spoke about the promise he had made, and then Judah said something that changed everything. "Now therefore let me, your servant, become my master's slave in place of the boy, and let the boy return with his brothers. How can I return to my father if the boy is not with me? I cannot bear to see the misery that will befall my father." Genesis 44:33-34. Silence filled the room. Joseph could no longer contain himself. He ordered all the Egyptians to leave, and when he was alone with his brothers, he broke down in tears. "I am Joseph. I am your brother, the one you sold into Egypt." Genesis 45:3-4. The shock was instantaneous. Benjamin looked at that powerful man and recognized the brother he had never had a chance to truly know. Jose embraced Benjamin, and there, in that embrace, something was restored, not just a family, but a story broken by envy and pain. Judah had chosen sacrifice, and that choice paved the way for God to restore what seemed lost. As Genesis 50:20 says, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." Jacob was old. His eyesight was failing, but his spirit was alive. He had lived long enough to see the impossible. Joseph was alive. His sons had reconciled, and Benjamin was there by his side. But Jacob knew his time was drawing to a close, and before he departed, he needed to do what the patriarchs did: bless his sons and declare their future. One by one, Jacob called his sons, and when it was Benjamin's turn, he said, "Benjamin is a ravenous wolf. In the morning he devours the prey, in the evening he divides the spoils." Genesis 49:27. Those words were prophetic. They weren't just about Benjamin, the boy. They were about the tribe of Benjamin, the descendants who would come from him. From a boy born amidst tears, a lineage of fearless warriors would emerge. A small but strategic tribe, fierce when necessary. Jacob's blessing revealed something no one could have imagined. Benjamin would not be remembered for his frailty. He would be remembered for his strength. Jacob saw what God saw, and before closing his eyes for the last time, he sealed upon Benjamin a destiny that would echo for generations. Because when God chooses someone to carry out his purpose, he doesn't just restore, he transforms. Years passed. Israel multiplied in Egypt, and when they finally left that land toward the promise, the tribes of Israel marched together, and among them was the tribe of Benjamin. They were not many. Compared to Judah or Ephraim, they were even small in number, but what they lacked in quantity, they made up for in skill. The Bible records that the Benjamites were exceptional archers. Judges 20:16 speaks of 700 chosen men, left-handed, each of whom could sling a stone at a hair and not miss. They became known as elite warriors, strategists, fearless in battle. And it was no accident. It was the fulfillment of Jacob's blessing. Benjamin is a wolf that tears apart. From the tribe of Benjamin came judges, warriors, and kings. Saul, the first king of Israel, was a Benjamite, 1 Samuel 9:1-2. Esther, the queen who saved her people from destruction, was from the tribe of Benjamin, Esther 2:5-7. And the apostle Paul, the one who brought the gospel to the Gentiles, was also a Benjamite, and he himself proudly declared, "I am an Israelite of the tribe of Benjamin." Romans 11:1. The heritage of the tribe of Benjamin was not merely military, it was spiritual. It was living proof that God uses those born into difficult circumstances to accomplish extraordinary things. The boy who was almost called the son of my sorrow became the father of a generation of winners. And this brings us to the revelation I promised at the beginning of this video. Think about it. Why did God allow Benjamin to be born that way? Why did he have to come into the world at the most painful moment? Why did his mother have to die in childbirth? Why did he, among all of Jacob's sons, carry this mark from the first day of his life? Because Benjamin represents something that is at the heart of God's plan, the transformation of the improbable. He was born into tragedy, but was called to victory. He was named Son of Sorrow, but renamed Son of Strength. He grew up as the weakest, but begat fearless warriors. And that was no coincidence. It was divine design. From Benjamin came leaders who changed the history of Israel. Saul, who inaugurated the monarchy. Esther, who saved an entire people. Paul, who took the message of Christ to the ends of the earth. They all had something in common. They were born into a lineage that knew pain, but refused to be defined by it. And here's the revelation. When the tribes of Israel settled in the Promised Land, the tribe of Benjamin received a strategic territory. They were situated between Judah to the south and the other tribes to the north. They were small, but they were positioned like a bridge, a connection. Just as Benjamin, the boy, was the link between Jacob and Joseph, his tribe became the geographical and spiritual link between the different parts of Israel. Benjamin and God's plan have always been intertwined, and the lesson is clear. God does not waste any pain. He transforms it into purpose. Its beginning may have been marked by tears, but God can rewrite it with strength and meaning. The biblical story of Benjamin is not just about a boy who was born in the desert. It's about how God takes what seems irreparable and builds something lasting, how he transforms grief into legacy, how he uses the unlikely to fulfill his purposes. Rachel died bringing Benjamin into the world, but through him, her name was never forgotten. Jacob suffered an unimaginable loss, but it was Benjamin who helped bring about the restoration of the family. Joseph was betrayed and sold, but it was Benjamin who became the bridge to reconciliation. And what about the tribe that came after? It proved that initial weakness does not determine final strength. The spiritual lessons from Benjamin's story are profound. They remind us that God is not limited by the circumstances of our birth. He is not bound by the pain of our past. On the contrary, he takes exactly what could negatively affect us and uses it as a platform for our purpose. Isaiah 61:3 says that God gives beauty instead of ashes, the oil of gladness instead of mourning, and a garment of praise instead of a spirit of despair. Benjamin was born in ashes, but he lived in beauty. He was born in tears, but he brought forth joy. He was born under the weight of anguish, but he became a symbol of praise and strength. And if his story teaches us anything, it is this: when God rewrites a story, he doesn't just fix it, he completely transforms it. Perhaps you were born amidst pain. Perhaps your beginnings were marked by loss or hardship. Perhaps someone tried to define you by your wounds. But God is saying today, that is not your final name. That is not your destiny. You may have been called Benoni, but God calls you Benjamin, son of strength, son of honor, son of divine purpose. And just as Benjamin created a powerful tribe, you too can create something meaningful from what tried to mark you. The journey of Benjamin, Jacob's youngest son, shows us something fundamental. God does not waste any suffering. Every tear shed at the beginning can become the foundation for something glorious in the end. Every wound can be transformed into strength. Every loss can pave the way for a greater purpose. Benjamin, son of Jacob, did not choose to be born that way, but he lived with the name his father gave him and not with the weight of the tragedy that brought him into the world. And today, the question remains, what name are you carrying? The name that circumstances tried to give you, or the name that God has already declared for you? Just as Jacob renamed Benjamin, God is renaming you today. He is declaring over you strength where there was weakness, purpose where there was pain, victory where there was defeat. If this story touched your heart, I invite you to do 3 things. First, leave a comment below telling us what God spoke to you through the story of Benjamin. Second, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because every day there's a new Bible story full of revelation waiting for you. Third, share this video with someone who needs to hear that God can rewrite any story, no matter how it began. Benjamin was born amidst tears, but he lived with purpose, and so can you. Remember, Jacob's last son fathered kings, queens, and apostles, and within you there is a legacy waiting to be born, a destiny that only God could have planned. May the biblical story of Benjamin inspire you to believe that no matter your beginning, God can lead you to an extraordinary ending. Until the next video, and may God continue to rewrite your story.